To get started, I'd like to introduce Paula Apsel, Senior Executive Producer of NOVA and Director of the WGBH Science Unit. She has worked both in TV and radio. Very early in her career, she developed The Spider's Web, which might be familiar to some of you. It was an award-winning children's drama series. She went on to become a radio news producer, and then in 1975 joined NOVA. And there she really set the standard for television science programming. She's continued to develop that standard and to reset it every year. But she really broke new ground when she started there. She did leave NOVA for a period. She worked with Timothy Johnson. She was the senior producer for medical programming at CVB-TV. In 1983, she was a Knight Fellow at MIT. And then in 1984, she came back to NOVA, this time as the executive producer. She and the series both have won many, many awards. And today, more people watch NOVA than any other science series, at least on American TV and maybe in the world. The NOVA part of the GBH website, the pbs.org website, is actually its most popular. So the name Paula Apsel is familiar to most of us, and yet we rarely ever have the opportunity to meet her or be with her. So we are fortunate that tonight is an exception to that. Please join me in welcoming Paula Apsel to the podium.
So, thanks very much to David. We really appreciate the museum hosting this screening and discussion. Doctors Diaries is a very unique long-range project. In fact, it's the longest-running U.S. documentary of its kind. For the past 22 years, NOVA's cameras have been following a group of 7 doctors from their first day at Harvard Medical School. All young, bright, and accomplished, none of them could have predicted what it would take, personally and professionally, to become a member of the medical tribe. Our cameras have been there through the difficult years of classes and clinical training, internship and residency, marriage and divorce, and out into the world as fully trained physicians. At a time when there's a national dialogue around healthcare, we see up close and personal what goes into the making of a doctor and what becomes of them in this moving final episode. I'm very pleased that 2 of the doctors featured in the film, Dr. Jay Bonner and Dr. Jane Liebschutz, are here tonight and will be available for questions following the clip. And also making the trip from London is producer and director Michael Barnes. Michael conceived the idea for this project and has enthusiastically filmed each of the 5 installments of the series. And now please enjoy a compilation of scenes from the 2-part NOVA special, Doctors Diaries.
Do no harm. That's your greatest gift to mankind.
7 doctors, 21 years, and saving lives is only part of the story.
Medical school is absolutely something that one cannot be emotionally prepared for.
Becoming a doctor is an experience that will change students from ordinary mortals into fully initiated members of the medical tribe. Our cameras tracked them from the first days in class.
She was way over this way to free herself up, right.
Okay.
To the shock of the teaching hospital.
Somebody's going to ask me, like, quick, Dr. Bonner, do your stuff, and I'm going to go,
Through heartbreak.
Divorced.
And triumph.
Doctor of Medicine, Ed Gradum Medicinae Doctoris.
A unique behind-the-scenes look at the making of a doctor on Doctors Diaries, right now on NOVA.
Today should be a very interesting day. I'm going back to Harvard and I'll be meeting up with the other students who were part of this documentary. I haven't seen many of them for 15 years or so. So it'll be fascinating to see how they have grown as people and matured as physicians. I'm Tom Tarter. I'm a board-certified emergency physician.
Good to see you, buddy.
Yeah, it is. You still working here?
No, I'm not here. I'm in California. You've got a little bit of gray.
Yeah, I got
Little
gray.
bit.
Yeah, you
Okay.
bet.
Yeah, I've got them too.
Hi, I'm Dr. LaWanda Grisette, and I'm a cardiologist.
To me, I kind of like seeing, who they become, and we were all just figuring out what we were going to be then. Dr. David Friedman, ophthalmologist and public health researcher.
I'm Dr. Jane Leapshoots. I'm an internal medicine, primary care, and preventive medicine physician.
Just the sheer sense of history with these enormous buildings, I think, is really what I remember. I mean, it's almost overwhelming in a way. Dr. Elliot Benacarrero, anesthesiologist.
Hi, how are you? I haven't seen you guys in so long. I haven't seen you. My God, how long have you been in? So good.
I'm Cheryl Dorsey. I was trained as a pediatrician at Harvard Medical School.
I'm Jay Bonner, and I'm a psychiatrist.
We graduated 17 years ago. Can you imagine? It's like we're old fogies, but I don't feel it. I feel like it was a few months ago.
The enteric hormone system, or the enterochromaffin system, a variety of different names for this whole collection of different cells. Going through this thing called the thorax.
I knew I couldn't be a businessman. I could never do that because I wouldn't care about any sort of product. I care about people.
A renal arteriogram, and you're going to tell me something.
I'm very interested in working with urban poor. A lot of people don't have advocates for their health. Even though we supposedly have a glut of physicians, there's still a lot of areas which are underserved. And there's a great need for good people to go in and work in those areas.
People have been telling me that before I came that it would be hard to do anatomy, but I'd get through it and it would be okay. And then we came in the first day, and it was worse than I ever expected it could be. And it looked so our cadaver looked so lifelike and so real. And I don't know, it was really difficult. I started crying. I left the room.
Down there, I don't know. Oh yeah, right. It's just... Right. Here's the ligament right here.
I always have to hold my breath and just calm down for a few minutes before I walk into the room.
Okay. Keep on just like right now.
Emotionally, I think it's very difficult. I'm constantly thinking about the person who donated their body, how they lived, and what emotions they had, and why they gave up their body.
I think your interest kind of overcomes any anxiety that you have.
Really? I mean,
After reading about it like all night in the textbook and everything like that, when you finally get to see it, I mean, all these things are very abstract, and you're trying to figure out, well, this goes here, this goes there, that goes the other place. And then, boom, it's in front of you. You can grab it, you can feel it.
Cranial nerve, number 12.
No, 7. It's by itself.
I think as we begin to work with the head and neck region, when the head will be unveiled from the pouch that it's been kept in, I think I'll be very uncomfortable with that, because for me, the head and the face are really kind of the seat of all emotions, the smile, a frown, and that will really bring home to me that this was a human life.
You get very nervous before the first time you see a patient. The jacket feels kind of weird. I was commenting. It feels like such a costume right now.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get used to it.
Ethel Hoffman, I want to introduce you. This is Jay Bonner.
Well, I don't remember good, dear. Hi, but hi.
Okay. Well, Jay's the one that you're mostly going to be talking to.
I don't know a heck of a lot now, interclinically, about, what to do, when.
I
And
wanted to talk with you about some of the problems you've had with your cough.
first of all, I just like to talk about your cough and what's brought you in to the hospital. And I'd like to do an exam of the back of your chest to listen to. The patient has been treating you more or less like a doctor, but you're going to fumble, you're going to be a little hesitant, and you're sort of afraid that the patient will look at you and say, I don't want this person near me. Get this incompetent away from me. If you could take off your top and put on a Johnny that we have, open in the back. You can leave on your skirt and the rest, and we'll all move over to this half.
You mean I gotta get nude?
No. We're going to close the curtains for you.
This body of mine. Okay.
You did a great job. That was very good.
I guess the first thing I want to do is take your vital signs.
What's that?
Before I forget that. I'm still a little new at this, so it may take me a moment to find, if you'll bear with me. I really enjoy seeing patients. I wish I could see them every week. It reminds me of what I'm doing in medical school. The other thing I wanted to know is if you have any questions, if there's anything you'd like to know from me.
No, darling, I just, one day you're going to be a great doctor and I'll still be around to see you.
That's right. That's right. You will be.
I think one of the strangest things about coming into this institution of medicine is that human lives and human drama is really an everyday part of your life as a doctor. And in academic medicine particularly, you know, there's interesting cases, and you sit and you hear about all the, you know, interesting disease, interesting this, interesting that, and all of a sudden you realize that's a person on the other end of this discussion.
Well, I was out walking my wee dog.
Your wee dog?
Aye. And the pain came on me.
Uh-huh.
And it gradually got worse, worse, worse. And they put me into intensive care.
How are you feeling about
I
this?
was worried. I'm worried.
You're worried?
Yeah, but I know I'm in capable hands.
What are you worried about?
I mean, I've never had a knife put to me before.
You never had surgery before? Uh-huh. The good thing will be that you won't remember what's been going on. And then when you start to feel better, you'll feel better, and they won't be giving you so much medicine.
Yeah, well, when I walk out of here, I'll put on my kilt for you.
You will?
Yes.
Okay. I think being in an operating room is one of the most intense experiences one can ever have. Having your hand on the case and actually helping when you feel needed is probably among the top 10 experiences to have in the world. What's happening is they're taking some vein from his leg and then some other vessels that are in the chest wall and connecting them up to where the coronary arteries are, which give the heart blood.
Topical cold, please. Let's wait and see what happens here.
Do you understand what's happening right now?
Yeah.
His heart isn't working, and Dr. Johnson is pumping. He's actually pumping the heart himself. The heart's failed. It's not working. It's not working. So that's what's happening right now, as we speak. Oh, God. This is terrible.
The heart wasn't doing anything.
I feel like I'm bad luck or something.
No, come on.
Bottom one is the
I can't
rate of
believe it.
pressure.
I told this guy he was going to do fine.
Conduit, we did okay with not having any conduit.
I don't know what more I can do. All right.
That's it?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
11:37.
I'm sorry. I know. I understand.
But the responsibility we have now is to kind of keep a calm head and help the family understand it. I feel the way you feel, but I can't go up to them like that.
Well, I wasn't going to go.
I know.
It's funny because I've never really had a patient that I've gotten to know who's died, and here it's happened right to here, and it's like a bad dream or something.
You have 30 minutes in which to finish this test book. Please recall that only those responses recorded on your answer sheet will be scored.
The National Boards is a 3-part exam which we're required to pass in order to become licensed physicians in this country.
It feels like it's such a poor test of what I really know. It's not a great indicator of me as a person or me as a doctor, anything like that.
Everybody feels like, I can't believe how little I know. And we're all used to taking tests and knowing.
Getting 90%.
90%. You know, we all did well in school. And to come in and be given a test where you know nothing, it's really hard.
I'm thrilled to be finished, but quite tired. I can look forward now to, with expectation, to my wedding, which is only in a week.
I now joyfully pronounce them husband and wife. Go in peace.
Miss Brown?
Huh?
Miss Brown?
Yes.
Hi, how are you today?
Oh.
Miss Brown is a patient who was in the hospital and unfortunately while there fell and broke her hand. I was asked to see her and do a neurologic examination.
Very nice. And I've been praying for you, and I know you were praying for me because you said you would. God bless you.
Those are very nice thoughts of yours.
Thank you.
Okay, now touch your nose. That's good. And my finger back again. Okay, now your nose and my finger. I think this interview was difficult because Miss Brown was not comfortable letting us see those areas where she knew things weren't right. But I, on the other hand, needed to know precisely those things because I knew that I'd soon be presenting them to my attending, Dr. Poser. Deviation to the tongue to the right. I wasn't sure that that was a significant finding or whether that just happened to be accidental.
Well, now, wait a second. If she has a real deviation of the tongue,
right,
what does that mean?
It means that there's something wrong with their cranial nerve
On
the
which
right
side?
side, the 12th cranial nerve.
Yeah, I know. But the tongue deviates to the right, let's say.
Right.
Where's the lesion on which side?
Left side of the brain.
Left side of who?
Left side of the brain if it's...
of the brain?
If it's cortical, but then it could
Do
also
you
be
ever
the
see
right...
deviation of the tongue from a cortical lesion?
I've never seen a deviation of the tongue from a cortical lesion. No.
Why is that?
Because I've only been in neurology about a week.
Beth, did you ever see deviation of the tongue from a cortical lesion?
No.
Why not?
The brainstem, many of the nuclei, including the 12th cranial nerve, are bilaterally innervated.
It feels terrible when you have doctors who you're looking up to for guidance and teaching, making you feel humiliated. That's compounded by the fact that you change hospitals every month or nearly every month. You don't know where you are, you don't know any of the people, you don't know the procedures. So you feel like ungrounded as it is. Any head injury you lose touch with your own strength in a way. If you keep staying in that environment and keep questioning yourself for long enough, you begin to think, I'm the one that's ignorant here. I'm the one that's faulty. Everyone else around me is wise and efficient and powerful and does a great job. And here I am, such a lowly little speck, you know. If only I could be like them.
Where to?
Thank you.
Hi, how are you?
I'm going to be doing a residency in internal medicine at Boston City Hospital, Boston, Massachusetts.
I don't have one?
No, you don't have
Thanks.
We're not letting you graduate.
My therapist in medical school told me medical training is a marathon. You just have to keep going, showing up every day. As soon as you get through one hurdle, there's another one. Sparrow Hospital, Lansing, Michigan.
Duke! Good
luck.
Thanks a lot.
We did it.
Congratulations. A big milestone.
For history.
Completed.
Finally, I get a job. It's my first job.
J.H. Bonner.
At last.
Elliot Bennett Guerrero.
It's going to be wonderful to finally be Jay Bonner, MD, instead of Jay Bonner, the medical student.
Jane M. Leibschutz.
Good morning, doctors. Doesn't that sound good?
This is everybody's congregating before we all go off to our respective jobs.
I didn't bring a stethoscope. I didn't bring anything.
My girlfriend gave me a button, Dr. Dave, and that's what I feel like, you know, Dr. Dave, nothing more, really.
Right now it's January, and I'm in ward medicine, which means that I take care of patients admitted to the hospital with basically any problem that doesn't require their being on the surgical service. It is the rotation, which is, at this hospital, one of the most difficult ones in terms of the workload. I've gotten to a point where, you know, it's not that I don't care about patients, but that the fact that I care about patients becomes less important than the fact that I am absolutely strung out and absolutely can no longer think anymore. You call a nurse? What's the matter? She's starting to move. I mean, I forget simple, basic things, you know, that I've, you know, people will remind me, you didn't do this thing on this patient. I'll be like, oh, you know, Jesus, I can't believe I forgot that. And, you know, that happens a lot.
Jay doesn't really have very much time to do anything anymore. He doesn't really read. He doesn't really get to go out too much. He's really, I mean, he's so exhausted. He's actually a pretty hyper person, generally, by nature. And then to see him so worn out, just sort of a shell. I mean, what I get is lousy. The best part of him, you know, goes away early in the morning and for the whole day. And then when he comes home, what do I have? Well, you know, he's this tired, grouchy thing.
I came in 4 hours ago. So far, I have admitted one patient with fever, probable sepsis, and done a lumbar puncture. Subsequently disimpacted that patient. Just great fun. What that means is to take all the stool out of that person's rectum by hand. I have visited all my own patients in the hospital, wrote notes on several of them, checked their labs, drawn some blood tests on patients that needed them to be done, and I've just now wheeled up my second admission for the night and will be going shortly to examine her. I'm taking a short food break because I'm getting a little hypoglycemic here.
It started out in the back of my leg. This is in September. I had the operation. Now, the front of my leg from here down is numb. And every time I take a shower, my whole leg gets numb.
So when you shower, you take your clothes off?
Well, I don't take a shower with my clothes on.
Okay.
Of course I do.
I'd like to ask you what exactly it is that you feel, and then come to an
My leg is numb. What else can I say to you?
That's fine. It may interest you to know that different people mean different things by that phrase.
My leg, from here to the tip of my toe, is numb.
I appreciate that this is something that has you very concerned. I came into medical training, I think, one of the more sensitive people in the field. I'm going into psychiatry. I mean, my whole emphasis is on the emotional and the understanding, the mental aspects of medicine, and yet, for all of that interest on my part, I cannot help but become this person that I don't particularly like, even.
This gentleman, unfortunately, was a victim of a beating over in South Boston. They came in and...
I'm on call tonight in the emergency room, so I'm going to be up all night.
Mr. Blosser. Mr. Blosser.
Yeah.
Hi. I'm Dr. Leapshoots. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling all right. You know, time is...
Where are you, sir?
Washington Hospital.
What brought you in here? I think that people talk a lot about how stressful it is to work here. I've had a lot of sort of late night discussions with nurses mostly about how difficult it is to work in a municipal hospital with fewer and fewer resources and patients who are extremely needy.
All right, I got a lot of blood here, so we won't need any more.
Sometimes I'll dream that I have AIDS, or I'll dream that I have cancer, I'll dream that I have, some horrible disease. When I was in medical school, I used to think I had all of these diseases. Like, consciously, when I was awake, I'd be worried, I had this horrible thing and that horrible thing. And I think as an intern, I'm very conscious of how healthy I am compared to my patients. I'm conscious of the fact that I don't abuse myself or my body. Well, I mean, being an intern, you abuse yourself because you're... This is a young lady who was found outside what they call a shooting gallery, which is where people shoot intravenous drugs.
I can't breathe this way.
You'll be okay. You're gonna be fine.
I cannot breathe this way.
I feel so burnt out right now that the idea of staying in a dysfunctional hospital like this for years on end is really not appealing.
Did you have some crack?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
But
do you have anything else?
I mean, this is what I've been drawn to always.
I'm one of the doctors here.
That's the doctor right
Okay? I'm going to help you.
You want to help me in here?
I'm going to help you, okay? Now, I need you to... You have to go number 2?
I have to go number 2.
Okay.
I promise there'll be no problem.
If you have to go, just go. If you have to go, just let it go. We'll help clean you up.
I promise.
If you have to go, you just...
All I can say is that I hope life after internship is nothing like life during internship, because this is not why I became a doctor. And I'm not very happy. And it's no one thing in particular, it's just being underpaid labor, spending very little time taking real care of patients, doing everything and anything that's necessary because I'm, the bottom line.
Being a psychiatrist is a wonderful career.
So here we are. Here's my office. Let's see, what have we got? We've got the chairs for psychotherapy, face-to-face, and the sofa for psychoanalysis. This is where I see my patients. Actually, it's embarrassing to go back and watch the old tape, as I recently did. I'm just struck by how full of myself I seemed. I was a young and vain boy 13 years ago. I'm still vain, but less young. Having been married and then having the experience of that falling apart and getting divorced has been enormously impacting on who I am and how I feel about myself and about other people, about stability, connectedness. So here we are in my apartment, and this is a painting by Ai, who had a show at the Boston Psychoanalytic Institute, which is where I saw it first and fell in love with it, and subsequently with the painter.
We sort of got to know each other through communicating about this particular piece because he was interested in it. And it was very refreshing for me to hear insight from someone who's outside of art world. His insight from his experience was very, very inspirational for me, actually.
This is as deep an exploration of the mind as my work. I've decided to become a psychoanalyst, and that means that, amongst other things, I participate in a psychoanalysis myself. So for the past 3 years, I've driven across town to see my analyst 4 times a week. Like most people in analysis, I'm hoping that what I get out of it is that I'll be happier. I hope for relationships that are more stable. I hope for greater satisfaction in my work and with myself as a person. I have a number of different facets to my career currently. Mostly, I work in private practice and see patients for the majority in psychotherapy. I really enjoy the teaching that I do, which is increasingly part of my work now. And I'm very happy to be a part of my career where I can do that. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. We've been talking today about parallels between patient therapeutic process and our own process, and I think one of the ways in which that's true is around self-forgiveness. As is true for many people going into intensive therapy, there's a painful moment of realization when you understand that you're still going to be yourself when you come out of it. Because I, like many people, I think, had a fantasy that I was going to be a new person, a different person. And I think that coming to acceptance of that, coming to acceptance that I am still the person I am, and I still have so many of the frailties and hang-ups that I've always had, and it's, life remains a challenge. All I can say about the question of whether I would do it again is I'm glad I don't have to consider that. I mean, one can't live one's life over. It's just not done. So I am here, and it's a better place than where I've been, and I'm glad I don't have to do it again.
In the population that I work with, 80% have had severe trauma in their lives, at least once. And most of the people who've had trauma have had multiple traumas in their life. 1 out of every 7 patients in our practice had a family member die by violent means, suicide, murder. One of the biggest challenges to being a primary care doctor is that, it's not well compensated for the work that we do, which I find incredible.
¿Cómo está?
Un poquito mejor.
Mejor. Over and over, the evidence is that if patients have good primary care, they're less likely to use expensive procedures, they're less likely to sort of use the emergency room, et cetera. And so why don't we compensate doctors who do primary care more and attract more people into the field? People are leaving the field. It's burdensome.
Tal vez por los pies? No. ¿Los ojos?
Ah, ya.
Los ojos.
Los ojos.
Okay. Venga conmigo. I don't know why there's so many divorces on doctors. I mean, maybe it's that relationships are a lot harder than this profession. My husband says to me, now remember, I'm not one of your interns, because you get into this mode of giving orders and being in charge, and it's really different in a relationship.
Maya, that's really, really noisy.
I have a really demanding job, which requires me to, stay late, work hard. I often am on the computer from 10 to midnight. Okay, we're all done with that now. Okay. Abigail, we're all done with that. Abby? And so the burden falls much more to Roger, for picking up the kids at daycare, dropping off.
How about the ones over here? My 3-year-old sometimes says I want to be a mommy and a doctor, and I have mixed feelings about it, knowing how hard it was for me and how strenuous it is and how much, you sacrifice. On the other hand, it's just an incredible gift being a physician, and so, if that's her path, I'll support her on it.
High five.
So Paula, as David mentioned, is the director of the WGBH Science Unit, and she's senior executive producer of Nova. Michael Barnes comes to us today from England, where he is the director and executive producer for the production company Periscope TV. He joined Nova in 1987, where he produced and directed programs like Secrets of the Lost Empire, one of the top-rated series in PBS history, as well as the first 4 installments of the series documenting the lives of the doctors you saw tonight. Survivor MD, which observed the physicians for 14 years, won an Emmy nomination. Mr. Barnes has served as broadcast consultant in India and Indonesia, working with government organizations and hospitals to produce health education and medical programs, and he recently returned to Nova to finish Doctors Diaries. Dr. Jay Bonner, as you saw in the clip, graduated from Harvard Medical School in 1991 and did his residency in psychiatry at the Cambridge Hospital. He is currently a private practice psychotherapist in Belmont and works in the outpatient personality disorder clinic at McLean Hospital. In addition, Dr. Bonner is currently a candidate at the Boston Psychoanalytic Society and Institute. And Dr. Jane Liebschutz, another star of the film. She also graduated from Harvard Medical School in 1991. She did her residency in internal medicine at Boston City Hospital and another in preventative medicine and public health at Boston University Medical Center. Dr. Liebschutz is a primary care physician at Boston Medical Center. She's also associate professor of medicine and public health at Boston University School of Medicine, and as well is author of a physician's guide to identifying and managing violence against women. So I'll start off with a question to each of our panelists, and then I'd like to open up questions to you all. We have some people with microphones, so when the question time is open, please raise your hand and they'll come around so that you can all be heard with your questions. So first, I think I'll start with Paula. Paula, why did you think that this project was important for NOVA to produce?
Well, I think that it was very important for, NOVA's one of our main goals, and I think one of the things that differentiates NOVA from many of the other science and science-like programs on American television, perhaps particularly cable television, is that we emphasize the scientific process, and we also emphasize putting a human face on science, really trying to find out who the people are behind the lab coat. And the same thing, I mean, what could be more important than medicine, understanding? I mean, we all have, many people don't know a scientist, but we all have doctors. And I think understanding the process by which a person gets educated and what people have to go through to become a physician, I think can only expand their understanding, especially in a time when healthcare is just so vitally important when it's part of the national dialogue. So I never questioned. I knew this was a series that really required a lot of resources from NOVA. And it's really hard in television today to sustain something for 22 years. I can't tell you. And also, I've always been a fan of Michael Apted's work, which he's made the famous 7 Up series, and I know Michael was too. So I never questioned that this was really important. How to do it is a different story. But that it was important that NOVA ought to undertake it was never in question.
Okay, well, that leads to a question to Michael. In directing this project, what were some of the challenges you faced in filming over the 22 years?
Well, a couple of things come to mind. I often felt it was like making a wildlife documentary. You spent a lot of time in sort of places that you weren't entirely welcome and were extremely uncomfortable, and you knew that there were these extraordinary rites of passage that these doctors in the making were going to experience, but it would be pure luck and a little judgment if you ever got them on film. So in some ways it was, I think we shot about 500 hours in the total for this, for all the films in the 5 installments. So I think that was a difficult thing. But and the other thing is that I always tend to approach documentaries as a story, and life is, all our lives are a muddle, and so one's trying to impose some sort of structure and authenticity on the story, and it's difficult because I think one of the judgments of whether we've been true to the spirit of Jay and Jane's lives is actually, I always think, what would it be like to watch this scene in the same room of them as them. And if I'm deeply embarrassed, then I probably have not been fair to them or to the story. And tonight was a pretty good test of that. And I'm probably going to have some words later. But
well, I hope you're not embarrassed, and Jane, you and Jay either. But Jay, what sort of appealed to you about this project and may have persuaded you to join it in the first place?
I'd been mad at my parents for not signing me up to be one of the Zoom kids when I was young. And I thought this was my big chance. Yeah, something like that. I didn't think it through.
But now you're a TV star. Jade, from the clip we saw, your intern year or your first year there at residency, it seemed to be really stressful and overwhelming, and you used the term burnt out, and it kind of seemed that that sort of environment might not be sustainable, but you've stayed in the environment and continued to care for this underserved population. So how have you managed to balance the stress and work with your personal life?
That's a really great question. So my patients always say, are you going to leave sometime? Are you going to leave? And I say they'll probably have to take me out in a coffin. I think internship is really hard. I think, Jay, the clip you showed of him, it was, it's just hard wherever you go. So I thought it was really interesting. About 6 months after I finished my residency, when I didn't have the overnight calls and things, like all of a sudden I sort of became myself again. And so I think just not, having some weekends free and being able to catch up on your sleep sort of brings you back to yourself. So I think sleep deprivation and time off really makes a difference. Actually, I do want to say one thing, which is that watching yourself on a 10-foot screen makes you want to run to a plastic surgeon right away. Or a good dermatologist. So if anybody knows one, let me know.
Thank God it wasn't in high definition.
Well, I definitely have more questions, but now let's open up the crowd. So there's a person up here who would like to ask a question. I think a microphone will come around to you, sir.
So I have two questions to Jay and Jane. If you could design training for doctors differently, what would you want to see done differently than your training? And what would you say to the Obama administration on how healthcare should be reformed? Two small questions.
Jane's given me the option of going first. I can't imagine why. Can you hear me all? I actually would think about changing healthcare before healthcare education. I think the big issue is, what does the healthcare system in the United States look like? And if we fix it, I think the people who go into it are going to know what they're getting into, and I think education will probably be a part of that. It's going to have to fit into whatever the world is going to look like. I think we desperately need to think of healthcare as a right and not something that some people get and other people don't. To me, it's appalling, actually. But there's a lot that's appalling about the world, so I don't know whether it's going to get fixed or not anytime soon. I'm hopeful about Obama being elected. I really hope he can make things happen.
I would say that when you design a system, you get the product that you designed for. And we've designed a system where people who have high technology, no offense to anybody, because I know this is technology, we all like technology, but where you get rewarded for high technology, where you get rewarded for invasive procedures, where you get rewarded for sort of the shiniest and newest thing, and you don't get rewarded for prevention. And that's why, I work in a hospital. Hospitals have so much power. People who are interested and systems that are interested in prevention are really very, very low on the totem pole, and I think it's because we designed a system that way. So if I were to redesign the system, that I hope, and I think that Obama has the ear. Some of the people I actually know from my experience in primary care are very close friends with Obama. In fact, one of his close friends is a guy who I know through my professional work. Is a physician in Chicago, and he's really public health minded. So I'm hoping that Obama has been learned and swayed by that. So, and I think you see a lot of people are really interested in universal health care, and the reason they're interested in universal health care is so that we can have the same sort of expensive health care where a lot of people make a lot of money off of the insurance, whereas why don't we just have universal health care where we as the public will benefit and we will put public priorities. And part of the reason why I chose to do the film is because I certainly have political views, which I were hoping, and my sort of view of medicine might hope get on the film. So you've heard it.
What do you think is the function of having the internship and the residency structured the way it is, with the number of hours and the number of hours and the intensity of the work, especially given what you indicated as the degradation of the service. I'm just puzzled about why you think it's structured that way.
So I think that you have to look, and I'm not a historian, and I don't know if there's a historian in the audience, but I think you have to look at the historical roots of internship and residency. They really were clinical apprenticeships. And it was a time when you didn't have, maybe not have beepers. Patients were in the hospital for 2 weeks at a time. And it was a very different pace, a very different, the technology, the interventions were much fewer. And so I think that maybe it was more reasonable at a certain time when it started. And then as medicine grew over the years, I think the structure didn't really keep up with the changes. And there's been a lot of attempts to change it. And I'm hoping that they will continue to grow. But the question is, how do you get young doctors to have exposure, clinical exposure? You need to see a lot of patients to learn. And so how do you do that within the structure and have people sleep? And I will also say one other thing, which is that Jay and I graduated in 1991, so that was quite a long time ago, and things have evolved since then, at least at Boston Medical Center. Once a week, every resident gets a day off. Of course, the attendings don't get a day off. I just thought I'd say that. We sort of get the vet. And but also there's a lot of more attention to, night floats, and so that you don't have so many hours on end. So there has been some attention, I think. So you're looking at, sort of one iteration ago in what you see of us. So it's not exactly what's happening today.
Ditto.
You don't have to. You're a guest. Okay. Just like mine.
Do you agree with what I said? Somewhat?
I completely agree with what you said.
Okay.
We have Nancy Oriel here, who's a dean at Harvard Medical School, so I just she's a guest, but, I thought,
yes.
She might want to make a comment.
So thank you very much to both of you for participating, and thank both of you for putting this out there for the public to see. And Jane's right, life is better. But the transition that you go through, the growth that you have to experience to go from being a pre-med student to being a doctor is well portrayed. And that's something that's actually very important for people to understand. It's not just, another day in the office. And I think you did an excellent job and a very sensitive job of showing the transition in a way that makes me proud of you guys.
I think he's done an excellent job, and it's had been a very hard project to bring together, and I really have a lot of respect for what he's done. So I wanted to, for all the hassle I've given him and all the times I told him he couldn't film when I was with patients, I wanted to thank him.
I do
There's a
appreciate
question.
that.
I'm sorry. There's a question back here.
Hi, I think this documentary or this series is stunning for a very simple reason, and that is that I'm an average person. I go to see my primary care physician, and I have a few specialists, and I have a few degrees of my own, and I think I've worked hard in my life. And then I see this, and I think to myself that the American public has absolutely no concept of what it takes to become a doctor. And the interaction is diminished in some ways to the visit or the insurance payment or the premium. And we really have to elevate the conversation, I think, in some level from the standpoint of respect to really make change in the system. Because, we talk a lot about healthcare finance, and all of that. It's not... It is about so much more than the numbers, despite the fact that the numbers are an important part of the conversation. And I think this, just this glimpse that I have gotten from seeing this piece inspires me to understand that in a whole different way. And so I, applaud everybody whose effort went into this, because, I just never knew I was quite so clueless. I don't think of myself as clueless, and so I guess thank you. It's not really a question in that.
Great.
Just a validation.
David, you've got a question?
Yeah, you just triggered a thought, which was we've been talking about what it takes to become a doctor. I'm wondering, for all of us, given all you've been through, what does it take for us to be good patients and to have relationships with you that make for good health?
We may have different ideas about this. I'll be interested to hear Jane's thoughts. I think it's one thing that's changed a lot in the time that I've been a doctor is the web. I really am glad that patients talk a lot to each other nowadays. And if you've got something that you're seeking a doctor's help with, it's much more possible, at least it seems to me that it is. I was a lot younger back before the web. But it seems to me that people are talking to each other, and there's a lot of consumer education by and for other consumers, and I think that's really helpful. It keeps us getting asked very smart questions. So, question.
So almost none of my patients have computers or the web and are illegal immigrants or whatever. So I actually have not even thought of that. But for the group in the audience here, I suggest reading a book by Jerome Grootman called How Doctors Think. And I read that book, and I was like, this is exactly it. And I think he has really captured very, very nicely that. And I, would put a challenge to people to kind of read that and get that same message in other digestible forms that people can have. And really understanding that your doctor's a human and that, where they're coming from, like maybe they lost a patient with something because they underdiagnosed, and now they're like super hyper about getting all sorts of tests. Like they may not, and here's the psychiatrist next to me, but they may not have conscious feelings why they may make certain choices, and that it's your sort of job as the patient to sort of really question and really advocate for yourselves. But I think reading that book is really helpful. Have you guys read it?
Yeah.
I think it's really quite enlightening.
So this question is mostly for Jay. Given the emphasis on boundaries in psychiatry, I'm wondering how often or if it comes up, I've seen you over the last 20 years, and patients wanting to talk about that or bringing things up.
Not very often, though it spikes a little bit each time there's a new episode. So we'll see. But it is true. There's a big issue about separating one's own personal life from the work one's doing in therapy, which is the main part of what I do. And most of my patients wouldn't otherwise know an awful lot of the stuff that appears in this. I mean, most of the stuff that's here would otherwise not be available for people to know. And from time to time that's come up, and it makes sense to sort of be frank about what's out there. It's obviously it's public at this point. But I'm sort of surprised on both sides, because sometimes when the show's been on recently, a whole bunch of people will come up in the same week and say, "Oh, I recognize you," and other times, years will go by and no one's mentioned it. So it's both there and not there in some way.
There's a question in the back. 2 questions, actually.
Hi there. I'm a medical student right now. Actually, there's actually a whole table of us over here. And a bunch of us are about to finish medical school and go off onto our internships and residencies. And we were just kind of wondering what advice you have for us as we're about to embark on this journey.
I assume you're talking to Jay and I. I don't know, Michael and Paul have other ideas. So when I was a 4th-year medical student, I took a trip with a neurology resident who I had met on my rotation. We went to the Grand Canyon and Santa Fe and, in the Southwest. And I remember she said to me at the time, remember this moment and hold on to it. And when the times are really dark, just remember how beautiful it was here. And so I would suggest in the next few months, or if you've had something, do something really wonderful and really imprint it on your mind. And then, and just hold on to that. And every year on your vacations, plan something really wonderful. Your best vacations of your entire life will be those you take during residency, because it's like you went from hell to heaven. And really let those imprint on you. And then the other piece of advice is when you feel like you're really not like yourself, don't worry. When you get to the other side, you will become yourself again. And that's okay.
Great advice.
Was there a second question at the back? Okay. And now, okay.
I was wondering how you chose the 7 medical students to feature in your documentary in the first place.
It was really, I thought that there would be very little choice, and I made a little announcement to the. I made a little announcement to the newly arrived students whether anyone would be interested, only expecting a handful to come up. But in fact, half the student body volunteered, and so literally about 70 of the class. And it really was an awful lot just instinct. I had about 10 minutes with each of them. I did want to get a mix of male, female. I did want to get different backgrounds, ages, sort of try to reflect the student body in terms of the makeup, so it was a little microcosm. But it was really just feeling who would be people that would stay the course, who would be willing to hang in when things would get bad, because sooner or later, the thrill of being in front of the camera wears off, in fact, incredibly quickly. And I wanted people that would stay there. And I think a lot of it was just my instinct and sort of kind of a gut reaction. And I was incredibly fortunate with the 7 I found. And I would like to return the kind words. I absolutely understand how difficult this has been. To be in front of the camera. I never, if I was a medical student, ever would have volunteered. And I think they've been extraordinarily candid, and I really feel that it's been a great privilege to have shared just a little fragment of their lives over the last 20 years.
Paula, given the response to, that's for me, given the response to Doctors Diaries and the rest of the series, but also considering the resources that were required to make this series, do you think Nova would produce another long-term type of project like this?
Times have changed in television, too, and I think it would be very difficult to get the resources to do something like this again. And also, the filming with hospital patients is so much more restrictive now that honestly, and our rights requirements are so much more restrictive that I don't actually believe that it could be done now. I mean, I know that there's kind of a new film being made at Mass General, kind of like Hopkins 24/7, which I think will be great, but this is being made by a network, and they have a lot more money than we do. So I think this would be very, very, very tough to do again. And, in those days, we were very confident that we would continue on and on and on. And, we believed in our own, eternal life. And the television environment has changed so radically that I don't think that we have that same confidence anymore. So the answer is kind of no. I'm very glad that we did it. I mean, I'm very proud of it, but I think it would be very tough to do it again.
Right. And there's a question on this side of the room.
Are the earlier episodes ever going to be re-aired or available on the web?
I don't know. I think part of it really depends on how the show does next week and the week after. So you should really tell everyone you know about it, because it depends whether my station WGBH feels it's commercially viable in order to make them available again. I mean, I think they're a tremendous resource, and I think we really have to think of how we want to use them carefully. But I think it. Unfortunately, it really does depend to some extent on how well the program does next week. If it does very well, then I think that there are a lot of possibilities. So let's hope. Tell everyone. Set their DVRs.
And there's a question at the back of the room.
Yes. First, thank you for all that you've done to help us understand your development and growth into physicianhood. As a medical educator, I am very aware of your having entered medical school when the new pathway was very young. And one of the questions that I am often asked is, so did the curriculum at Harvard Medical School make a difference? How did tutorial experiences work in those first 2 years of basic sciences contribute to your learning? And has there been any lasting impact of that, at that time, very new curriculum, and a curriculum that much of the rest of the world has looked at, tried to emulate, and tried to understand whether or not it was worth it all? And you're the people who can tell us whether or not it was worth it all. So I'd be interested in your perspective at this point.
So I still remember some of the cases from first year medical school. I remember a case of tattoo. There was some like tattoo thing, and the tattoo went into the macrophage. And am I there, Harvard Medical School? Do you guys have that case? Okay, so there was like some clues. So I think that and I actually consider myself a medical educator as well. I mean, not a PhD sort of only medical educator, but I do a lot of medical education. And I think that the case-based method is something that really helps hone and makes you want to learn and excite you and brings some sort of emotional connection to the learning you're doing. And I think that if there are any neuroscientists here, I think that they would tell you that when you have an emotions heighten your memory. And so maybe there is something to it. I don't know. It was very pleasurable. I learned a lot about the people. It is sort of a model of how you learn sort of over and over and over again in medicine. So I would say that I would do it again that way, but I actually wasn't in the other way, so I don't have anything to compare to.
I was not sure it was altogether a success. I thought that fundamentally what one wants of a doctor getting out of medical school is a humongous amount of learning. And the new pathway when we started was brand new and relatively disorganized. And I think a reasonable amount probably fell through the cracks. My guess is that with some years of experience to work on it, that many of those kinks have been ironed out. But I think that you're not going to be able to get all the way to the other end of medical training as a doctor without having a lot of face time with patients. And it isn't necessarily the case that in the first or second year of medical school it needs to be that way. I don't think. I enjoyed the I enjoyed the kind of story aspect and the kind of investigative aspect of looking into cases in the early years. But I have to say I was really, really anxious about the volume of stuff that I was being required to learn. And I think in some ways it would really have been easier to have learned a huge volume if it had been taught in ways that other courses that I'd already taken, where I was similarly trying to learn a massive volume of new information, were presented, which is that it's fairly well organized, and it's sort of say, here it is, here, start to read it, take your notes, use your flashcards, get through it, and know it. And I think that is actually what's needed of medical students. So, I have mixed feelings.
I would also say that not necessarily the new pathway, but some of the choices about how much time we spent on different topics. Like, we spent 6 weeks on genetics and embryology. We spent 8 weeks on anatomy and physiology. Even now, I never did the arm, and like even now, I never really remember the bones in the wrist, So I think that some of the choices were made not necessarily new pathway, but that restricted anatomy. I mean, Jay's a psychiatrist; he probably doesn't need anatomy, but I'm not sure he needs embryology either. But I think some of the these heavy duty sciences, genetics is really good for science, but learning the rifflips that I learned in medical school never really helped, whereas learning the arm and the hand would have been more helpful. But that's not necessarily new path. Well, maybe it is new pathway choices.
So we have a question down here. This table. Did you? Yeah. Well, back. Oh, yes. Yeah.
So there were two comments about when you started it. First, and when it would end. First of all, when you started it, did you envision it going on for this long? And second of all, I've seen it described as the last of the series, and I feel this separation kind of anxiety. It should be just the next episode rather than the last episode. So I'm curious about your perspective when it began and your perspective now as apparently it is ending.
Yeah, I think, I don't know how Michael feels, but I definitely thought that we would continue it on. Again, I was kind of influenced by Michael Apted and, he could do it, so could we. And I think he was on 49 Up or something like that at that time. So, and as I say, whether it's, right now we plan that it's the last, but that's very sad, and you never can really know what's happening. We felt that it was time to do another episode now, because when we left these students in the last episode, I don't know if any of you saw it, it was really kind of sad, because they were, for the most part, not in a good place. And we did those in a different way. We actually did each student separately. And Michael and I had many, many arguments. No, not arguments, discussions about it. We could probably still go and discuss it, about whether a more chronological approach was better than a biographical approach. That's actually been one of the most, this is, I'm proud of this and proud of Michael, because this is an amazingly technical feat of filmmaking. Just how to put this damn thing together. We're pulling our hair out. And, I still don't know whether we did it the best way. We did it a way, and it does seem to work. And how many hours should it be? And, just the discussion and the thinking and the doing it and undoing it is amazing. So we're a little exhausted, actually. I don't know, Michael, what do you think?
No, I think actually the very first episode, it had a very difficult birth, the series, because the very first program is one that I hope actually never gets released on cassette again. It really was a real, designed by a committee, because I think I'd wanted to try and make an observational film with no commentary, but because there was an air date that we had to meet, the first year of medical school simply did not provide us with enough sequences to really fill that hour. And so the solution was to bring in a lot of talking heads, and some of them were quite interesting talking heads, but the film had no integrity, and it really did not reflect what I think either Paula and I hoped for. And it was, but we had to get something on the air.
But it was really good fodder for the second-year medical student show.
Yes, it really was. But I think it did grow from strength to strength, and as I say, it was partially, a lot of it was serendipity, but I think it was just. I think we just established a working relationship, and in the end, I think that was the strength of the film, was really the trust of the participants, hopefully the mutual trust that they would be treated in a way that was not going to be a short-term hatchet job.
And I also can I just say something about the camera? Do you say cameramen? Is that the right word, or the people who walked around with the sound and cameras, of which I see Steve in the back, and because they really. Sometimes like Michael or Julia or some of the other people Peter had to duck out of the way, and it would just be the camera and the sound people, and they were really very, they really, really knew how to work well, and they are an unseen force.
So we have the cameraman here, Stephen McCarthy, who's one of our fantastic cameramen, Nova. And also Peter Frumpkin and Julia Cord, who were, I think, associate producers on the series. Is there anyone else that I'm missing? And because this took place over such a long period of time. But another thing is, I actually think this 2 hours is the best. And I don't think that's necessarily because of our skill. I think that it's the best because it has a real dramatic arc to it. That you start off with, and you have a bunch of kids. And they kind of are who they are, and they're nervous and cute, and their problems are problems, but they're not that serious yet. And then they go into periods of really intense pain, just intense. And then they get lost in the wilderness for a long time, and they don't know what they want to be when they grow up, but they don't want to be what they're doing now. And now I feel, I like movies with a happy ending. And I think for the most part, this is a show with a happy ending, because I think that the vast majority of our students have their lives together, both professionally and personally, and that we're leaving them in a really good place. And so that's why I feel that maybe this should be the end, because they are incredibly interesting people who really opened up to us. People start to get more guarded as they get older. I'm not sure that they would say things of that nature again or in 10 years. And we did have a harder time on this shoot, not necessarily with Jay. Well, Jay, we had a hard time all the time, or Jane, but with some of the others who I don't think they were being intentionally guarded. I just think that's the natural tendency of human beings not to spill their guts when they're 40 years old anymore the way they did when they were 32. So I think when you see the whole thing, you'll see that when you get to the end, you think, wow, you're so happy that they kind of came out of the wilderness and got to a place that's important for themselves and for society. That, kind of why mess it up with the reality of life?
Well, thank you, Paula. I think that's actually a good place for us to end. Paula, Michael, Jay, and Jane, thank you so much for being here tonight.